Hello and welcome back to our monthly session of Meet the Expert. I'm Angela Cripps, the MD of the Recruiting Gym, and every month we bring you an expert in their field for half an hour free training. How wonderful are we? It's one of the 6 free courses that we offer in the Recruiting Gym. So if you're interested, click on the green button in Crowdcast. If you're over on LinkedIn, I'm sure one of our people will put the link in there as well, so you can find out more about us and the free training, the free coaching, the free motivation that we give everyone. Now, I'm really pleased to say I've made a new friend. I've got a new person that's part of my network that I'm just really pleased about. This is Anthony Sutton. Good morning, Anthony. How are you?
Good morning, Angela. I'm absolutely brilliant. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, apart from a cough. So when you're presenting, I will be muting and disappearing because I don't want to be coughing through your presentation. Now, we met a few weeks ago through a joint connection of ours, Dan Maguire of Cube 19 and Wellbeing fame, and he asked me if I could do a not a webinar, a podcast with you at short notice, and I loved it. We had so much in common, didn't we, when we were talking? Made a big impact on me. So we caught up, thought how we could work together, and I suddenly realised, oh, I've had a dropout for February. You could do the favour back and talk to our people with regards to your subject matter. So this is about how to build a high-performing culture. So if you could just take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself to our networks. There are probably a few people that don't know who you are.
Absolutely. And thank you for inviting me, Angela. I'm so pleased we did connect. My name is Anthony Sutton. I run a business called Cream HR. We were set up to help out basically SME type businesses, so small entrepreneurial businesses with people. We consider that people are the most important investment, and I use the word investment rather than cost, in any business. And we help organizations build successful businesses as a result. And Dan Maguire is a good case in point. So we work with Dan on both Broadbean and Cube very closely, and I've known him for many years. The whole purpose of our business is to help businesses understand how to add value through and with their people. And we've done it for 23 years now.
Fantastic.
Retirement.
I know. Life just flies by, doesn't it? I'm coming up for 20 years with going it alone with my own company in the next 2 weeks, but 34 years in recruitment. So it's definitely a passion of ours. People, I love the fact that you use the word investment. I'm going to start using that. I'm going to nick that one. Thank you, because they are, and I think actually that has hit home in the last 2 years. I think a lot of people have adapted their thoughts, sort of the powers that be, realizing actually if we haven't got the people, we haven't got the business. And the skill shortages have obviously helped to push that home, but certainly just having those people to support through the tough times and getting your business through it. Yeah. If you haven't got them, it's not going to work. So I'm going to leave you. We've got 30 minutes with you. If you have any questions for Anthony, please put them in the chat or comment on LinkedIn for us, and we will deal with those at the end. So we get 30 minutes of your expertise. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks, Angela. That's absolutely great. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's probably a mantra or a line that many of you might have heard before, and some of you perhaps not, but fundamentally, it's true. Whatever your business does, whatever you're involved in, I know I'm dealing with a predominantly recruitment-based audience, and I used to run and start and owned a recruitment business of my own many years ago. We all strive for high performance. We want to achieve good results, whatever we're doing. And that can be measured in lots and lots of different ways. We can be measured by profits, by revenues, by market share, by penetration into an area, by our environmental impact. However you do this, the performance of your business is always going to be about and based on the culture that you build within that organization. What I'm going to share with you today, I hope, is going to help you get some really good foundation stones to help you build high performing or better performing businesses yourselves. There are 4 key cornerstones that every high-performing business the world over have in place that helps fundamentally make them successful. Now, for many, many years, and as you can see, I have got many years of experience, researchers, economists, investors, other interested parties in business have been trying to understand and research and work out what it is that makes one business perform so much better than another, particularly when they're similar businesses. And there are loads and loads of examples, obviously, of organisations that are similar, of one outperforming the other. So for many, many years, this has been the subject of considerable research. There are organisations like Gallup, who are a huge research business, and people like Professor Barbara Alamo-Metcalf, who have literally interviewed hundreds of thousands of people all over the world in businesses of different size, different scale, different sectors, university, going to interview people to find out what it is that made or makes that business more successful than another one. Now, when I first came across this, the logical thing really to my head was, well, of course it's going to be physical things that matter, the pay and conditions. So if I can pay more than someone else, I'm going to obviously have a better culture because we'll get better people. Our facilities are better. We've got better offices. We've got lovely things for our employees to enjoy and to benefit from. Or maybe it was things like the opportunity to progress. I'm in a business that's growing very quickly, so I've got loads of chance for my career to grow very quickly. So those would be the normal things that you'd perhaps think are the main drivers behind successful high-performance business. The research concluded that there are basically 4 things that every single high-performance business has in place to help them perform well. The first one is clarity, and that would be from a number of angles, and we'll go into these in more detail as I go into the depth of the session. The second one is strengths, so using people to the best of their ability in simple terms. The third one is praise. That's creating a culture where people are genuinely appreciated for what they do. And the fourth one is concern. That's creating an environment and a culture where people are genuinely and really cared for by their employers. So let's have a look at each one of those in turn and in a bit more detail so that you can get to grips with how this can help you in your businesses. So clarity is the first topic and the first fundamental cornerstone. So why is clarity important in a business? Well, I think in all the years that I've been working, and I've spent a lot of time working within recruitment and within the recruitment space, the number of times that I've either heard candidates say that they've joined a new business and the job isn't what they expected it to be, or the company's not been sold in the right way and it doesn't meet up with their expectations, or even the employer saying that we've recruited someone who doesn't actually fit the brief of the job. This is such a fundamental starting point for anyone to get right. If you don't have clarity within your organization, within someone's role, you aren't going to build a successful business. So job descriptions are really important. Not the most exciting topic for most people to think about, but developing and drafting really considered, well thought out, accurate, objective-based job descriptions is really important to you. I'm sure lots of you as recruiters or hiring managers have the challenge all the time from the hiring manager giving you a brief summary, which is either, we've lost Anthony, we need to replace him, so go and get me another Anthony plus. And that can be plus, I want this new bit of technology, or I'd like a bit of this to go with the job. There's only one me. I'm not saying I'm irreplaceable, but there is only one me. And therefore finding another me isn't going to be easy. So getting to grips with understanding how to write values-based focused job descriptions is really important. The ones we do are all about having purpose. So we have a clear mission statement. We have lots of outcomes that people need to achieve. And these are the things that people are going to be measured by in their role. We also include, obviously, the skill sets that people need and the behaviors that we're looking for in there. But that piece of clarity is fundamental to anyone to succeed in an organization. The next part in clarity from my mind is organisational structure. Doesn't matter how big your organisation is, it's imperative for a new starter or anyone to understand the reporting lines in the business, to understand who does what. So if I need to go to finance because I've got a query about some of my expenses, I need to know who I've got to talk to. If I need to go to HR because I've got an issue around a potential grievance matter or something to do with my contract, who do I talk to? That's organisational structure and clarity is so, so important. And that does include boring physical things like where things are in buildings. If you're joining a big company, it's really imperative that people do know where to go to find physical things and to find people to help them in any given situation. The next part of clarity is around purpose, vision, mission. So this is to do with what's your business trying to achieve. I'm going to use a really stupid example in some ways. So for example, if I was particularly interested in environmental preservation and climate change, and I was an engineer in that particular space, I might not be particularly interested in joining one of the big oil giants. Now, that isn't to say that those companies aren't investing money in technology and time and resource into developing new fuels for the future, but fundamentally, they're still extracting huge amounts of gas, coal, and oil from the ground. And that would sit very uncomfortably, perhaps, with me as an individual who is far more about wanting to build a quicker, greener world. So getting that alignment is absolutely essential as well for performance. If my mantra was all about delivering high quality service, I wouldn't feel very comfortable and I wouldn't perform very well if I was joining a company where it was pilot high, sell it cheap. So that alignment and clarity also needs to be reviewed and to be right. And the final piece in this for now is values. Lots of businesses talk about values nowadays. It's a big topic for most people, and lots of businesses have the values written up. You need to make sure you recruit people who are well aligned to your values. Now, lots of businesses write up values, and there's a difference between writing values and living them. So from a cultural point of view, this is about living and breathing your values. If honesty and integrity were really important values to you, I wouldn't advise you take a position in government or politics, because clearly they have a different view of honesty and integrity to the rest of us. So it's very important as an organisation to make sure that you are living and breathing those values and that you can demonstrate that to new recruits or to anyone within your organisation. Values aren't simply things that people tick in boxes to get into the Sunday Times Top 100 or to win Investors in People or written up on walls to look funky for when people come in. It's about living and breathing these. If you are fundamentally an honest and professional organisation, demonstrate it in your actions, how you treat people, how you want to be treated yourselves. If you're interested in transparency, show transparency in everything you do. Particularly now with a lot of Gen Z people coming into the marketplace, they are far, far more aware and in tune with things like values. So massively important. So values to me key, but clarity, in my opinion, is the most important and initial building block to get right in any business. In fact, if I go to Gallup, who originally did this research many years ago, they're still doing it, by the way, they haven't stopped, they still interview people, but the first question on the Gallup 12, and if you want to look at the Gallup 12 questions, are fairly well known from their research of the questions they managed to distill all the research into. Question 1 is, do I know what is expected of me at work? So asking an employee of a business, fundamentally, do you know what you're here to do? So clarity is very, very important. The second part is strengths. Now, there's a reason why most of us are good at certain things and not as good at others. And it's generally because we either like them, so it's something naturally we're inclined to enjoy and we do it well, or we have a natural affinity to that. And you can see that all the way through your life. So at school, there'll be some people who are great at maths, some people who are great at music, some at sport, whatever. It's natural talents coming to the fore. Now, yes, I know there are a few people in the world who are very talented in lots of different areas, but when you transfer that and map that onto a working environment, it's imperative that you give people the opportunity to do what they enjoy best as often as possible. So, for example, if you were recruiting for a forensic accountant, the one thing you want to give that person to do is lots and lots of detailed analysis on lines and lines of data, looking for errors or whatever it may be, where they can absolutely throw themselves into what they love doing and that they can enjoy that work. The worst thing you could do with that person would then be to try and turn them into something else, to give them presenting opportunities or sales opportunities. So giving people the chance to do what they do well every day is really valuable and will drive performance in your organization. Now, I often get asked, does that limit someone's opportunity? A logical question and a really well thought out question. If I'm focusing simply on this, doesn't that limit my opportunity to grow in my career or in the organization? And in simple terms, no. There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to become the best in the team, and then the best in the department, and then the best in the region, the best in the company, the best in the world. There's no limit on being good at what you do. And I think this is all about historical organizational structures where people had to follow a certain path to get to a certain place, to get a salary rise, to move into a different area. Those structures were smashed a little while ago. People are much more aware of the fact that they need subject experts in all sorts of areas. So there's no limit on how good you can become by focusing on what you're good at. Indeed, we recently lost arguably the best footballer of all time, Pelé. If you look at what Pelé did, he was a brilliant footballer. He played football. He was a lovely guy. He had a great personality and all of those wonderful things that went with him as an individual after his career as a footballer had ended. But what was Pelé the best at? He was the best at football. And that's why everyone still talks about him. Now, I've certainly experienced in my time a natural tendency for some organizations to want to develop people in different ways for career advancement. It's particularly common in organizations that have big HR teams who want to grow breadth and depth of skills. And I can remember many years ago working for a tech firm in London. They were owned by an American parent. And there was one guy who was a brilliant performer year in, year out. They had a very complicated performance management structure, and it was based on about 20 different criteria. Every year he would get A star in 18 out of 20 of those criteria, exactly the same to every year he didn't do so well in. And I was actually on a call with the CEO in London with the head of people in the States, and the head of people in the States was insistent that they're going to get those two A's as well. We're not going to be satisfied until he gets A star in all 20 of those areas. We were very blessed to have an enlightened CEO in London and Europe who simply argued back to them, if you force this person to be brilliant in those two things, what do you think is going to happen? And there was a silence. And, well, nothing really, because we want them to be brilliant. It's simple, just make them good in those things. And the CEO said, fine. He said, you want me to make him good in those two things? I can work all year helping him focus on those two particular things. And he'll get there because he's dedicated and he's good. Do you know what's going to happen to the other 18? They're all going to go to B's and C's, and they'll be all over the place because he won't be interested in those. He'll have to work so hard in dealing with something that doesn't come naturally to him, which is these two areas. And actually, even worse than that, we may lose him, because if you force him down a route where he's not happy, he's an employee in really high demand in a tech society. So we really do not want to lose that guy at this moment in time. So after much haggling and renegotiation, the CEO actually decided to take those two criteria away and change them and give him two other new areas which he knew he'd actually thrive in and he'd enjoy. And they moved on, and the guy actually stayed in the business and performed exceptionally well year in, year out, and did get to A's in all 20 because he got two things added to his list that he needed. that he enjoyed doing rather than he hated. So always try in your organisations to give people the opportunity to do what they do well and what they enjoy doing as much as possible. So the third topic is praise. Now, it may seem absolutely bleeding obvious to want to give people praise. And it is, of course, very obvious that people do want to be appreciated for the work they do in your organisations. It may be perfectly obvious, but it is incredibly rare how often people do get given genuine, good praise from their employers. There was a survey undertaken not long before the COVID pandemic broke out in the UK, and I think it was undertaken by, it was either one of the union groups or the IOD, and they surveyed tens of thousands of workers in the UK, and almost 80% of respondents said it would be nice if someone said thank you every so often. Now, if you think of that for a moment, it actually shook me to the core of how dismal many people's lives must be in businesses up and down the UK. This was almost 8 out of 10 people never being given any appreciation whatsoever for the work they do in businesses. And it's so simple. Praise is free. It doesn't cost you anything. You can simply say, well done, thank you, to people in your team. The most important thing about praise is that it becomes a regular part of your organisational culture. Now, I can think of all of you watching this now going, well, if I start praising people all the time, it's going to be terrible because all they want is more money because I'm telling them how good they are. Money is a relatively low-level driver for most people, except we're living in very difficult times with the economic the cost of living crisis for most people at the moment. But generally, money becomes very low down in the list of priorities for most people in jobs. So on that basis, don't be overly concerned that if you're giving people praise, that the next thing they're going to do is come knocking on your door and asking for more money. It's not necessarily correlated in that way. In fact, Angela mentioned earlier about change during the pandemic. The world has changed during the pandemic. I think a lot more people have considered their work-life balance, and this is all about getting that work-life balance right. People want to have a working environment they enjoy. So creating a culture where you're praising people is very important. Praise is also important to get right. It's massively good to say thank you, but try and make it specific. For example, if I was making a presentation today, so take today as an example, and I'd actually said one of my team, I'd asked them to do all the prep for me, which I didn't, by the way, but if I had asked them to do all the prep and they'd been working until 11 o'clock last night because they were trying to find a particular statistic or a bit of advice for me to fit in, it would be really good for me to finish this today, hopefully with some positive feedback from Angela and from the audience, saying that you love this, that it was absolutely brilliant. And particularly they're like this. And I could go to that team member and say, I want to share with you the fact that your work really helped. It made the presentation so much better. It added loads to it. And actually there was some specific feedback about what you did for me, which was brilliant. And I want to share that. So make your praise as specific as possible and give it as often as possible. Now, I also have a few things that I'm very conscious of as well. Try and avoid giving praise or try and avoid taking the credit for someone else's work. It's very common in very political organizations, so often big corporates where there's lots of politics going on all the time. It's quite normal for people to take the credit for someone else's work for their own betterment and to get themselves into a good position within that organization. It's horribly demoralizing and demotivating. It actually forms part of a bullying culture in general if you're actually stealing someone's work and taking the credit for it. And it's just a really bad thing to do in terms of creating a positive high performance culture for your business. It's great to go up and say to someone, thanks for what you did. I did the presentation the other day. It was brilliant. And what you did and what you added into that for me was really, really valuable. It makes someone feel 10 foot tall. They can go home feeling on top of the world because their boss or someone in the business who's seemingly important has appreciated them and the work that they do for that business. So it really makes a big difference. And praise can take many forms. There are lots and lots of books out there around praise. So do research that yourselves. There's lots of ways to do it. It can cost money. You can spend some money on praise. My advice is, if you're going to spend anything at all on specific praise to say thank you to someone, get to know that person quite well to try and make the cost and the investment worthwhile. So, for example, if someone's a football supporter and they want to watch a particular game and they can't get a ticket, getting them a ticket for a game would be a massive plus, and it wouldn't cost you the earth. So try and make sure your praise is very specific, because that really helps someone know that you do know about them and you're interested in them. The other thing, ideas for praise, just simple. If you're still having people coming into work and parking is a problem, so where I live, parking is a nightmare. If I have a parking space and someone's done some great work for me, give me a parking space for a week. Really lovely little thing to do. Or if someone's been working late because they've had some data to pull together and they're trying to do their job and help you, what's wrong with giving them a morning off or telling them to come in late? It's really valuable, simple stuff that you can do to make a difference. So absolutely, praise is a key driver in performance. And the final driver is concern. And this is about businesses who genuinely show that they care about their people performing a lot better than those who perhaps say they care about people but don't do that through their own actions. So most of us spend most of our waking hours at work. So working for an organization who genuinely care about what you do and your welfare is really, really powerful in driving performance. A number of years ago, we worked with a business. They were in luxury car retail, and we worked with them to change some of their terms and conditions of employment, which is always difficult. So they were actually reducing people's contractual sick pay from a very high and a very generous level to a much more acceptable level. So they effectively took 2 months a year contractual sick pay down to a lot less. They'd gone through a proper consultation process and everybody agreed to doing this. The day after the change had been made, one of their team was in a horrible car accident where they were hospitalized, and they were told they were probably going to have to stay in hospital for up to 6 months. The previous sick pay scheme actually allowed some pay all the way up to 6 months. So yesterday they'd have been fine, they'd have had their salary paid for a long time, they'd have been able to pay their mortgage and all of those bills. So imagine that poor person lying in hospital, everything's fallen apart, and I've now got a real problem that I can't pay my bills, my mortgage. The managing director and the chairman of that business actually went in to see that person as soon as they could. So as soon as they were in a condition where they could take visitors, they were the first people to see them after immediate family. And they made a point of saying to that person, don't worry, we know we've just made that change. We will honour the old terms of your contract to make sure you don't have anything to worry about financially whilst you are in hospital. Now, you can imagine the benefits of that. Her colleagues would be coming in, and of course, there's always people who aren't intentionally wanting to be sort of worrisome, but they will be. They'll say, oh my God, what are you going to do about your salary and your mortgage because they've just changed the sick pay? The power of that person saying to them, it's okay, they've taken care of me, it's all fine, is enormous. You can just imagine all of those people going back into work going, wow, we work for a business that really, really does care about the people we work for. We are working with someone quite special here that actually makes it worthwhile. The performance uplift you get from that communication spreading through your organization, through people talking about you and talking about the fact that you are decent people, is massive. Now, I'm very conscious of the fact that not every organization could be as generous. You can't all say, yes, we'll pay you for an indefinite period of time. It doesn't have to be about money. There are loads of ways that you can help people who are struggling. We do have lots of people struggling with cost of living at the moment. So doing different things to provide advice to them, to introduce them to schemes and ideas and incentives that might just be able to help, and being there to listen sometimes is simply one of the most powerful things anyone can do. So genuine care is one of the most unusual things that businesses might think of to drive high performance, but it's possibly one of the most powerful drivers for all of your employees. So becoming an organisation that genuinely cares will lead to significant performance gains. Now, I wanted to add one additional thing. So those 4 cornerstones are almost a given for every high-performing business the world over, but there are always additional things that each one of them will do themselves, which will have an impact on how they do things differently and how they perform. And as I'm talking to an audience of people who are predominantly in the recruitment space, so whether recruiters or hiring managers, I thought I'd share something with you which also can underpin getting that cultural piece right. So this is a way of making sure you get things right at an early stage. I wanted to share with you something called the law of crappy people. Now, terminology, I was thinking about this last night, so whether that's actually particularly offensive, and it really isn't. The law of crappy people was something I came across about 20 or so years ago now, and it's a very simple but actually quite hard to deliver mechanism that can make a massive difference to performance and to cultures within a business. It was a law structured by 2 legends of Silicon Valley. So these are a guy called Ben Horowitz and Mark Andreessen. They actually, one of them was the guy who created the first commercial internet browser. So we wouldn't be able to do this without Mark Andreessen. And they both created the world's first SaaS software business. So they were the first people credited of building a software as a service business. And that was in the 1990s, believe it or not. But they had this idea of the law of crappy people. And what it was they set standards within their business, recruitment-wise, that they would never go below. So every recruit into their business went through a very rigid and set process. It wasn't ridiculous. So it wasn't a process like Google where they just put you through the mill forever and a day because they want to. This was a very clear and very effective process that they had. But everybody in the process scored the candidates. And to get a job within LoudCloud and within Opsware, candidates had to score above 8 as an aggregate score from all of the people who'd been doing the interviews. Now, they were brutal recruiters. They had exceptionally high standards. They were hard to get into, and it was actually a very challenging place to work in terms of people trying to recruit in there. What it actually did was help build a high performance culture. So they were recruiting people who fitted from a technical point of view and a cultural point of view really well. And it worked to the point that they achieved their goals. They set out to be effectively the best technology businesses in the world. And in the first one that they built, LoudCloud, they didn't do so well, but that launched within the first .com crash. And everyone gave them a hard time saying, you built a business, you had it 4 years, you employed just under 400 people, and you sold it for about 116 million. Well, not bad figures in my head in the middle of a fairly bad crash for their sector, but they got absolutely pilloried in the technology press for not delivering. They were very clever. They kept the software they built, and they kept about half the workforce, and then they started a new business called Opsware. Opsware only existed for about 4 years. They employed about 500 people worldwide, and they were sold in the mid-2000s for $1.6 billion. So the whole concept of this from their point of view was to build a high value business through people. They understood if they got the people bit right, they would punch miles above their weight in terms of how much value the company would have. They were bought by Hewlett Packard, who are obviously a massive corporate, and per head of employee, I think it was one of the most expensive, and still is one of the most expensive acquisitions ever. And it was all down to the quality of people that they had in the business. So the law of crappy people, you can find it online. I've written a little bit about it because we use it in some of our work, and I'm really happy to share that with you in more detail separately. So I started today by saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast every day of the week, and it does. And I've hopefully shared with you the 4 key foundation stones that go into helping you build a high performance culture. So clarity, strengths, praise, and concern being the building blocks you need in your business to build a really high performing team. I've shared with you at the end the law of crappy people, which can help you to recruit really fabulous people in the first place, which helps that culture start from scratch. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed what I've shared with you today, and I hope I'm about on time, and I'm really happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for that, Anthony. I'm on YouTube with the law of crappy people. I'm trying to get the right link for people, because there's so much that's been on there. There's so many videos. So obviously I want to try and get the original. So we will get that for you and put those in. But there was quite a few things that you referenced in there. Certainly around Gallup. It surprises me people that don't know Gallup and the resources that are available. There you go. So just push that over a little bit so we get the whole book. Well, to do it from there. First, break all the rules. Ah, yes, Buckingham Kaufman. Okay, so it is critical, isn't it, that people expand, get out of their comfort zone. So if you're not a reader, you can get it on Audible. But if not, then you've got sessions like this, and that's what this is all about. Just giving people the opportunity to think, oh, wait a minute, I don't know about that. The 12 Gallup questions, and to me, they look like around employee engagement, but they reminded me of the 6 questions from Roger Dupree's 6 questions. So he worked at Rank Xerox for 20 years and did that study. And again, just that management communication, what's needed from individuals so that they do feel like they're part of the organization, they are contributing, they know what they're doing. The first one being, what's my job? And yeah, all of this resources out there for people to make sure that they are doing it. So I suppose my key thing that I wanted to point out from all the things that you're saying is it's a conscious effort, it's activity. Don't just allow it to evolve into whatever it is it's going to evolve into.
I was actually going to say, I think the Gallup stuff is really interesting, because I came across that 20 odd years ago, and they're still researching it, and these were probably very data-driven analysts to begin with, who expected to find simple data points to work out how they'd get the answers. And it was quite mind-blowing to them that the questions all came into a much more emotional, culture-based space. And from our point of view, we work predominantly with smaller sort of dynamic businesses up to maybe, 500 people. And we tend to view that the first 6 questions are the most applicable for smaller businesses, because the next 6 tend to be in a more corporate space where it's a bit more about that. But they are fascinating, and it's very easy to find this stuff. There's lots of research out there and some really good stuff, but it's about actually living it. Ticking boxes to say you've done something is one thing, and it does take work and an achievement, but having a business where people actually do bother about their people is so much more powerful.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm speaking at the Recruitment Expo next month, and my title is Happy Cows Produce More Nutritious Milk, all around employee engagement. But the research is there. Treat people, or cows, better, and actually they'll produce more. And that's a Gallup study that I still quote on employee engagement. And I've got the figure in my head, 198,567, because I see it on the screen all the time. And I always reference that I can get behind a study like that. These ones that you see on the telly, that's like 60 out of 75 people said this, and you're like, really? But 198,000, yes, okay, I'm going to listen to the results on that. And things like that high performing team, it proves if you can get them engaged, give them all those things, answer those questions that we talked about, 27% higher profits, 50% higher turnover. So yeah, why not do that? Because it's going to make a huge difference to your bottom line. And I think that's what we need to get across to a lot of companies, that you're not just doing this to make people feel good. It benefits everyone. If the company's doing better, then obviously you can put that back into the business and develop more people, make it more fun and spend on things. So yeah, it all links, doesn't it? That's the key.
there's lots of different stuff. I was very conscious. I don't want to talk about us. There's a guy I know who's runs a business in this space. He's brilliant, and he worked with Haven Holidays. And I think in 2011 they were absolutely slated by a watchdog about they were terrible. They had terrible ratings. They made lots of money, but they were really pilloried, and they were enlightened enough to engage this consultancy that I know well, and these guys did a lot of work with them. But it was about the board actually genuinely bought into the fact that they wanted to change. And within about 5 years, they became #1 employer in the UK for wellbeing. They won a special award at the Sunday Times because I think they were 5 years out of 5, either at the top or one of the top in this sector repeatedly. So they got a special award because they weren't just doing it for a one-off. This company had literally flipped its culture from being about the bosses making money and they didn't give a monkeys about anyone to actually you can make, and the bottom line figures, in fact I've got them in front of me because I was doing a lot of research on this. Their profits also went up. From 2012 they made 138 million, and in 2017 they made 196 million. But that was also coinciding with being voted as one of the best place to work for wellbeing. And that's so it's the power of actually really embracing it rather than talking about it. You've got to live this stuff, but it isn't hard.
No, I mean, and that's the thing as well, isn't it? And it doesn't have to be just the person at the top. They need to be engaged. They need to drive it. But everyone in the business can actually have a part to play within it as well. So again, from a teamwork point of view, it's perfect. So engagement strategies. I've just been working with a company where, the management team got together. They presented what they would want in their engagement strategy. They went and did the values with all of the individuals within the company. From the values, they worked out and asked them what they would like that would make a difference in their workplace. And then they presented that to the board, and they've just had all the information back on what's going to be implemented this year. And of course, all the other ideas that maybe were a little bit too expensive. If it works and it's 27% more, they'll get that for next year. So again, everyone wins at that. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. Really appreciate that. We've put all the links in the chats. If you want to find out more about Cream HR and how they can help your business to become a high-performing team, then do reach out and connect with Anthony on here. And we hope to see you on many more of our sessions in the future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Angela. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.